Hi, this is Laura from Grayne Co. In this tutorial, we are going through the process of how we complete our DIY signs in our kits. So let's get started. So first of all, you will want to paint your background. We are using Fusion Mineral Paint. When you paint your signs, I find it best to start with your sides first. That way you can hold and move around your board without having your fingers in the nicely fresh paint that you did on the top. So you want to do less coats, watching your corners for drips. So you can see as I'm handling the board, I am not getting paint on my fingers, and then just checking my corners for drips. And then when you're done, you can lay it down. And then you want to paint in the direction of the grain on your wood, which is the direction of the lines run through your wood. So you want to get some paint on there, lay it on, and then your final movement of your brush is taking your brush right across very lightly and evening out those strokes. And then once again, check your sides for paint drips, and then leave it. So if you've missed any little spots or you find it's not even coverage, that's okay, because the more coats you do, the more even it will become. So we're gonna do 2 coats on this. We'll let it dry, and then I will come back and continue on with the next part. All right, see you soon. Okay, so your first coat should be dry, and if you feel your board, you will feel a rough texture. Now that can occur because of brush strokes, too much paint, and the wood grain can swell a little bit as well when you apply your paint. So what you'll want to do is take your 400 grit sandpaper. That is the sandpaper that is a little bit more fine feeling rather than the 120 that's a little bit more gritty. So you're just going to want to sand with the grain. And make that buttery smooth. Don't forget the sides. Just feel it with your hands. If you feel any texture anywhere, just take that sandpaper and finish off sanding. And then when you're done, you're going to take some paper towel and you're going to give that a wipe, and then you're going to go ahead and do your second coat. If you're happy with it after the first coat and you like what it looks like, you're more than welcome to keep it at that finish. But I'm going to do a second coat, and then I'll come back later and I will show you how we do our stenciling. All right, so I'm back with the next part of our tutorial. So by now you should have painted your background. You should have given it a good sand. If you are doing a background that is dark or bright or a rich color with lots of pigment, you're going to want to let that dry for 24 hours. Or a little bit more, just because it takes longer for those colors to dry underneath. And if you put a vinyl stencil on top of those types of colors, when you go to remove it, it can leave some of the adhesive behind because they're starting to dry together. So to avoid that, if you do your base one day and the stenciling the next, then you will find you'll have a better product in the end. So just a little tip there. So we're going to put on a vinyl stencil. If you've never done that before, you will notice there are 3 layers. We have a transfer tape, inside is the black vinyl stencil, and then you have your background, which is the gridded pattern. So what I like to do is flip it so the gridded background is facing up. I will grab a corner and I will slowly roll it across. Now you don't want to just pull it off really fast. There's sometimes some little delicate little pieces that you don't want to remove, and sometimes they'll catch and you can rip them, or you can just peel them right off. So go slow, and I like to roll this along the vinyl instead of pulling on it so it doesn't lift those details. So go like this. If it does happen to catch a black piece, just roll this back, give it a little rub, and then continue peeling this off. Okay, so you no longer need that piece. Now to line it up, when we are doing small pieces like this, I will usually take and flip my board over so the painted side is going towards the vinyl, the sticky part of the vinyl that is laying flat on the table. If you're doing a bigger sign, we do what's called a hinge method, and we do have a video for that, and that's where we use a piece of tape down the center of our stencil after positioning it in the place that you want it, and then you'll just do one side at a time. But we're going to just do it for this type of method. So what I'm doing is I'm lining up an edge to my board, and now you don't want to let the vinyl touch the whole sign, because if it does, it will make contact, and sometimes it's not easy to get off. So I'm just lining up one edge. Oops, see, if I make contact a little bit on an edge where there's no details, then it's easy for me to remove. So I'm just laying down one corner, going down to the next, and then dropping it in place. So I can see with a very thin black line against my board here that that's even. And then I'm gonna flip it over and give it a rub so that it sticks to my surface. And I'm going to do the same thing with my transfer tape. So I'm going to roll it on a sharp angle, and then I'm going to straighten out and roll that way. And if you pull on it again, then there's the likability that you will pull on some of your black vinyl. So I tend to roll it across the surface, and that helps to keep those pieces in place. All right, just like that. That no longer is necessary. However, before scrunching it up like that, you may want to look and make sure that you didn't peel off anything that's black. If you did, just pick it off the front and just place it back on your board. That is totally fine. But once you scrunch it up in here, there's no getting it back. It's very difficult to open that up. Okay, so take your hand and just gently rub over that, making sure everything is in its place. Now here we like to use Fusion Mineral Paints Decoupage and Transfer Medium. We like to seal our stencils so that way when you are painting, your paint won't bleed under your stencil and give you fuzzy lines. No matter how smooth you paint, sometimes there's little micro ridges underneath your stencil that paint can still travel to. So we like to do this, and it just helps us give those details a chance to stay in your stencil and not bleed underneath. So we take a foam brush and we apply a little bit on, and you're going to want to dab on every bit of your cut stencil. Now you don't want to get carried away. You don't need a huge amount. You want to dab wider than the stencil itself, so you don't want to just stay carefully in the details. Pounce, put a little pressure, pounce on it, and pounce wider than the image, so that way you're putting even pressure along that edge. Now, normally I would be able to do this whole Valentine word, but for demonstration purposes, I'm just gonna stop here. Once I've done a little bit, I'm gonna turn my foam brush over and I'm going to gently pull across and smooth out that glue. So you can see it's just a thin, shiny covering over top of your stencil. That's all you want when you're done. If you're getting more than that, it's because you've got too much in your brush. You may be putting too much on, and so forth. So I'm going back, dipping a little bit. Now, just because when I swiped, I may have hit some of the next letter, that is not enough to seal it. It's best to double back and pounce again on those details. Just give it a little bit. See, it doesn't take much on your brush. Just squish it right in there. But you can't just pounce randomly and smooth it over. That is not enough to ensure that you can have crisp detail when this comes off. So regardless if your stencil has lots of detail or little, it's best just to take your time on this particular step to make sure that you have applied this correctly to all of the cut detail of your stencil. Now these are pretty medium size cutouts on your stencil, but if you get really tiny thin lines, you actually want to spend an extra second or two and pounce that glue in. It's harder to actually get the glue in those little tiny details than it is to put it into these bigger ones. Also, I like to smooth it out in the direction of the grain, which is my board is side to side. You want to paint that way as well. So this kind of trains you to paint that way rather than smooth it out and go this way. So this is a nice thin layer. You can kind of see that thin shininess to it. Yeah, that's the glue. If I was to touch it, it is a bit tacky. This won't take more than 5-10 minutes to dry on its own. You can speed it up with a cool blow dryer. I don't like to add heat to the back of my vinyl just in case it creates more stickiness with the adhesive. You can put it in front of a fan, just a regular fan in your house. But either way, it can just sit here and dry for 5-10 minutes, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how to paint. All right, see you soon. Okay, so I'm back now. So your board should be not tacky anymore and kind of smooth if you rub your hand across. So now it's time to paint. So for example, this one, you could easily do it 2 different colors. You could do a color for the heart and a color for the word. So if the details are far enough apart, you can definitely do both colors at once. If you are a little intimidated by that, you can definitely kind of tape off where one would end, and that way you can finish with one color and then peel your tape off, cover over the part that you painted before, and do your other color. So that is an option as well. Sometimes when you put your vinyl on, you may have a little bit of an edge that is exposed. If it's very close to, if the detail is very close to that edge, then I would suggest taping that off just to give yourself a little bit more coverage in terms of when you go to swipe that brush, you're not gonna leave a nice colored line at the end. Anyway, so depending on your color and the color of your base will determine really how many coats it will take you. Most of the time 2 is enough. However, I have a white base. I am using a red color, and red does not like to cover over a white very well. So this one will most likely take me 3 very thin coats. You don't want to do heavier coats because it takes longer to dry. You also don't want to do heavier coats just in case for some reason you didn't seal this very well. Maybe you missed a spot. There's all sorts of reasons. So less is definitely best, so you don't force anything under there that just in case. So I got a little bit of paint on my brush. Slide this over, and I'm going to brush that on and then even it out. Put a little bit more on my brush, brush that on and even that out, brush that on and even that out. So I went back and forth like that. Now when I do that, you see those overlap marks. So the same thing when I paint the back. The last thing you want to do is just gently go across your design and even out your paint. So you can see here now with your first coat, you can still see some of that underlying color, and that's exactly what you were looking for. It will dry quicker. The second coat will solid it up even more, and because it's a red, like I said, we most likely will have to do a third, but that's okay. So we're just gonna put our brush in a bag, and same with our paint, so it can sit out while we wait for this to dry. Once again, you can stick it in front of a fan. You can use a cool blow dryer just to speed up the drying process, and you'll just keep doing those coats until you're satisfied with your coverage. So I'll come back after and show you the second coat just so you can see how much of coverage it is, and then I will come back later and reveal the stencil, okay? Okay, so we're on to our next coat. Now, this is just me, but I like to flip my sign upside down because you tend to stroke heavier one way than you do the other. So when I go to paint this way, then I'll hit more of the other edge than I did before. So once again, just a little bit of paint. I start in the middle, lay that on, a little bit more, watching your edges if you didn't tape them, and then even that out. Now, I will bring this closer so I can see some spots that are just have a little bit of a white appearance to them. So once I go to do the third coat, that should solid up nicely, and then we will reveal the design, and I'll show you how to peel your stencil off. So I'll come back once I've done finished my third coat. Okay, good luck on yours. All right, so my stencil is dry, and you can see it's got great coverage there. You can't see any of the white underneath. So what you're gonna do is grab a corner when it comes to removing the stencil. Okay, I have no nails. Okay, and so I like to pull on a strong angle here and then even out. And I like to not just rip it off really fast. I like to pull close to the surface. That way, just in case, especially if you have a stained board, that you can make sure that you don't remove any grains of the wood. You can come and pick these out as you go. Now these vinyl stencils will tear and when you remove them, so don't worry, that is what's supposed to happen. And you're never going to use it again. So I like to remove it in the direction of the grain, so that's why I have it turned this way, because it's easier for me to pull it. But I will go back this way now. Now you can see some pieces are being left behind because they've either ripped as I pulled it, or they are the inside of your letters. All right, there we go. So I like to use an X-Acto knife, and I will just get in there and pick those off. Now you don't want to dig into your surface when you are trying to pick those out. You kind of want to come in at an angle and pinch that vinyl, and then you can use your fingers to pick it up. This knife doesn't have the best tip, so this is not coming up very easily, but you just don't want to come in it right at the edge where you've painted, because you can nick what, you can pick at what you just painted, and you don't want to do that because you've just done such a super job on your sign, and you don't want to pick that away. Almost done. Now, if you're having a hard time with this, definitely good light is a must, so you can see where your vinyl starts and stops. Now normally when I'm done, I would give this a sand. However, the red is dry, but because it's such a high pigmented color, it takes a while for it to dry underneath. So if I was to sand this to smooth out any detail right now, it would discolor the white of my background. So I am just going to leave it till tomorrow, and I'm going to give it a light sand with a 400 grit sandpaper, or the fine finished one in your kits, and then it'll feel good. You don't have to do that if you don't want to, but it is there if you wish. And now this one, a little trickier. Definitely take your time with this part if you are a little unsure. You just don't want to leave your vinyl on too long after you painted it, just because you don't, depending on how long you left your board to dry, you don't want them to dry together too much. So if you can get it off As soon as your paint is dry, that is fine. I wouldn't pull it off when it's wet, because as you can see, if you go to touch it, it would wipe wet paint everywhere. So anyways, that's it. Super cute. This one's going to be used on our Valentine's display, but we have lots of different designs and seasons and regular decor stuff that you can do to create your own custom signs. All right. Good luck on your projects.